Hello, hello, and welcome again to a Beatles program that we call Things We Said Today. This is a weekly show, a podcast in which we talk about anything that has to do with the Beatles, the past, the present, and very often, the future. I'm Ken Michaels, also known from my other Beatles program, a syndicated show called Every Little Thing, and I'm being joined by my three regular co-hosts. First of all, we have a contributing writer to Billboard magazine, also The Hollywood Reporter and AXS.com, that being Steve Marinucci. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Ken. Hello, everyone.
Also, longtime writer since the very beginning for Beatle Fan magazine, that being Al Sussman. Hello, Al.
Hey, Ken. Hello there, everybody.
And we have our resident musicologist and freelance writer who used to work for the New York Times and is still contributing articles, so we hear, for the New York Times, and also writes for Beatle Fan, that being Alan Kozin. Hi, Alan.
Hello, Ken. Hello, everyone.
And we also bring back our frequent guest, Tom Frangione, who wears many hats. He writes for Beatle Fan as well. He contributes to Joe Johnson's Beatle Brunch. He helps out Mark Lapidus with the Fest for Beatle Fans. He's also a guitar player, helps out Pat Denizio with the what's the name of the group?
There's the Scotch Plainsmen.
Scotch
Plains, New Jersey.
Okay.
Yes.
And if we have any time, we might also learn about Tom's major contribution backing up brute force. We might talk about that here on the show.
I didn't know about that.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many hidden talents behind this man, but if we have
54 years down the road, that's right about where I thought my life would be right now.
It's your epitaph.
On your gravestone,
Yeah.
that might be the first thing mentioned.
I worked with brute force.
That brings the number of Apple artists whom I've jammed with, I think, up to 2. He and Lon Van Eaton.
Hey, that's still something.
Hey, Lon's a good guy. We like Lon.
That's true.
All right, on the show today, it's going to be mainly a lot of news items, and we will be talking about the fact that, and the news broke just a few days ago about the Beatles performance, the 65 performance at Shea Stadium, which is actually going to be shown in theaters with the Ron Howard documentary of 8 days a week. But before we talk about that, last week on the show, we were talking about the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl. And we had Kid O'Toole as our special guest, and Alan Kozin couldn't make it. So I thought that I would get Alan's take on the new release, what we know about it so far, as well as Tom's. And we do know that the CD and the digital release for Live at the Hollywood Bowl will actually be a week before the film comes out in theaters, and then it shows on Hulu the next day. So it's actually September 9th is the release date. There'll be a vinyl release coming out in November.
Uh-huh.
And the CD and digital release will have 4 bonus tracks, although one of those songs came out already, Babies in Black. It's not as if it hasn't been released before. But I thought we'd start with you, Alan, and your thoughts about the upcoming Live at the Hollywood Bowl release and the fact that it's being reissued after all these many years.
Okay. I haven't caught up with last week's show yet, so I don't know what the rest of you have had to say. But, for me, it seems, first of all, I'm glad to see the thing is finally coming out. I would rather have put at least one whole 64 show and one whole 65 show on it if it was going to be one CD, or have all 3 of the shows if it was going to be 2 CDs. The tapes are out there in great quality already on the bootleg market, so you would think that they would want to compete with, the bootlegs out there. So I'm slightly disappointed that it's merely, even though it's using new tapes, which is a great thing, that the first part of the album is just a recreation, apparently down to the edits, of the 1977 album. And it doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever that the 4 bonus tracks are just tacked on at the end instead of woven into the set, because, the thing ends with Long Tall Sally, which for several of their touring years was their final song, kind of deserves to be the final song on this set. And you would think that even though it's not going to be a real Beatles set because it's going to have stuff from 65 and 64, you would think that those 4 tracks should have been woven into the running order to be kind of an idealized concert start to finish. So that doesn't make any sense to me. I kind of hope that in the remaining couple of months they reconsider that, because I would suspect that they'd be hearing this from a lot of people. And the other thing is the cover. I mean, I know it's just the cover, but having basically what is the film poster be the cover of the album also, to me, is a little disappointing. I like the original 1977 Hollywood Bowl album cover, and there are many other things you could do like that have to do with, just for example, the Hollywood Bowl and the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl, or, some sort of variation on that. But to have it just be the film poster, I mean, I understand it's a tie-in for the film, but this is also presumably an album of some enduring stature that is going to have a life of its own beyond the film. It reminds me of when I got an early version of the Sessions album, when I was supposed to be writing liner notes for it. It began and ended with a little snippet of Christmas Time is Here Again. And the guy from Capitol explained to me that was already obsolete. They were taking those out, but for some reason, someone at Capitol had decided that it was going to come out for the Christmas market, and they wanted that there. And it just struck me immediately as ridiculously short-sighted, as if it's not a Christmas album. And it's an album that you would expect to play all year round. So to begin and end with Christmas Time is Here Again is just kind of silly. And someone at Capitol apparently realized that and took it off. This is like that, okay, we have a film coming out, so let's tie this into the film, and that will be our cover. Again, doesn't make any sense. So glad it's coming out. Not the way I would have done it, but happy to have those tracks in any form they want to release them. But I just think that the running order should have been different, and it should have had a sensible cover. How's that? Okay.
I got some questions that I'd like to bounce off you, but I want to get Tom's take on it first.
Sure.
Well, I'd have to echo 95% of what Alan said about the sequencing and the completeness and the cover. A couple of different twists on it, though. I, for one, am happy that they kept the sequencing of the album itself, because I can't believe I'm saying this, and please don't tell Bruce Spicer I ever said this. This is the album I knew growing up. But
yeah.
a lot of people did, and it was uniform here and in the UK, and a big hit on both sides of the pond. And I kind of like that. And, George Martin was involved in sequencing it and, doing the edits. Sometimes it was, from the 1965 shows. I think it was on Dizzy Miss Lizzy is a composite of 2 songs. I kind of like it that way. But, Alan's 1,000% right that, it's not just that Long Tall Sally is the last song, of the either the concert or this sequence, but there's a whole big, it's the last song of the night, and we want to thank you for coming, and we've got to go home. And, Paul, they have his whole spiel about this is it. It's over now. From what I gather, there's a small gap after that, and then the 4 bonus cuts come in. I'm not sure I would have woven them in there. Not that it's any kind of blaspheme or anything to say, oh my God, you can't put I Want to Hold Your Hand in right before Help. It wouldn't be that, because it was a composite to begin with. Mm-hmm. But I think I'm going to fall back on this is the way the hit album was done. What I would have done, that said, because let's face it, that I think, pretty much puts this in the damned if you do, damned if you don't category. People are going to say, I want the original sequence, but they're also going to say, we want bonus cuts. And when you're doing it on a live album, it's dicey unless it's a single show. Let's say this was the Shea Stadium album / film, and they put Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby in its proper spot in the running order. I get that. But trying to put them in, no matter how you slice this, wherever you would have put, you can't do that, or I Want to Hold Your Hand, or Babies in Black, it would have been however well thought out or how much thought went into it, it still would have been somewhat arbitrary. So I think the best play probably would have been something similar to the Let It Be Naked album. Put the album out as it was, right? We still have Let It Be in all its glory, the way the Beatles meant it to be, and that's not coming out. You have an alternate with the Beatles, Let It Be Naked. Here, what they may have considered doing, and how I would have done it, would have been the album as it stands, the 35-minute album or whatever it is, and a second disc with the complete 64 and either or of the two 1965s. Look, we've all collected the bootlegs for years, and it's always nice to have the whole thing in case you want it. But when you get into 3 shows, it's more than one disc, not nearly enough for 2, and it's always fleshed out with things like press conferences and newsreels and things like that. And the 265 shows were precisely the same set list. So that would have created a great deal of duplication. Had they done it with the proper album, the 1977 album as one disc, and then a 64, 65 complete shows on another disc, just doing a little bit of counting here, they did 12 songs in each set in 64 and 65, so it's 24 songs. Only 3 were repeats: Twist and Shout, Hard Day's Night, and Can't Buy Me Love. So you'd still end up with very little repetition, which is good. And you wouldn't have that really weird sense that, Long Tall Sally was the last song and they came on and did like 4 songs for an encore. And, Long Tall Sally was obviously it was the closer in 64. And having an alternate closer, I'm Down, which was the closer for most of the 65 and 66 tour, would have given, I think, a real good saleability to it. Alan brings up a great point that this thing has to have some legs. So a lot of duplication of having both 65 shows might have cut into that, into the cachet that this whole thing brings. And, speaking of the legs, one of the things that Alan, I think, was getting toward on the cover to me is going to present some confusion to people, if not right now, when there's a lot of press around it, a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, where it says in big banner letters across the top, the Beatles live at the Hollywood Bowl. And right smack in the middle, the movie, 8 days a week. People are going to say, was that movie about the Hollywood Bowl? Or they might look at the movie and say, or the soundtrack album and say, is this the soundtrack to that movie? And neither one of those is the case, obviously.
Or is 8 days a week even on it?
Right. Well, it sure ain't the title song. We know.
And especially when the DVD, I'm assuming that there will be a DVD or Blu-ray of some kind, if the DVD has exactly the same cover.
Yeah, and that might have been like a good place to put a sticker. Make sure you check out the 8 days a week Ron Howard thing. But I'm not sure that titling right in the middle does this package any justice. Just to let you know, I know Alan was a big fan. I'm going to try and do something here with the camera. If you look over my shoulder there, you can see what framed album cover is standing there in the background, right? Yeah, that's one of my favorites. I love that album. That's about as far as I can get this camera. But I always loved that album, the Hollywood Bowl. I mean, it was the only time, or not only, but the first time I had a chance, at age 15, and you go do the math later, to go and get the first time I went and got a new Beatle album, upon release. It was exciting, and I listened to that album and wore out copies of the LP and the cassette in my high school days, and I still enjoy that album tremendously. So, the cover issue is disappointing to me, recognizing that they had at least 3 ways they could have done this. They could have put out the original album, or they could have done what they're doing now with some bonus cuts, or they could have put it out as a double, as we just described it, or they could have gone with some deluxe, all 3 shows, and however they broke that up, the 65s on one, the 64s on another. There were just entirely, there's a whole good list of ways they could have done this. And there's one more they could have actually done, which I don't think we've talked about yet, is, after the 4 bonus cuts that they are giving you, and Ken is correct that, only 3 are previously unreleased, despite what the press release says, there are 4 more titles culled
Right,
from the shows that there's more than enough room on the discs to do. I mean, certainly if you can get 24 tracks on the 2 discs, you can get 21. So we lose I Feel Fine and If I Fell and I Want to Be Your Man and I'm Down along the way. So had they done a super deluxe single disc, right, 21 cuts, I mean, then you go nuts and you say, boy, this is really terrific. This is really super. You'd get about a 70-minute, give or take a 70-minute disc of all the songs from both shows, however they'd be sequenced. But it's a difficult thing to realize now is that this is probably the last we'll see or hear of a Hollywood Bowl release. I don't think a year from now they'll say, oh, we heard what you guys said and here's both shows. Don't think that's going to happen. It's interesting though, and this is purely just an idea, and not at all a prediction, but the labeling of the 8 days a week on the center of this. If you think back to how the anthology was done, you look at those 3 anthology covers, for sure they're part of the same project. Okay, they're 3 different pieces of the same puzzle. This may be, and again, this is pure speculation, but picture that same cover next year, and right across the top it says the Beatles live at Shea Stadium or the Beatles live at Budokan Hall. These could all now be considered part of one project, the Beatles live release chronology, for lack of a better term. But who knows? And I thought that the first time I saw the album cover, or what we believe will be the album cover, and I was saying, boy, that's not really that far a stretch when you consider that they're putting Shea Stadium out in the theaters with it. And to Al's hypothesis here about a future DVD release, will that be part of it too? Right? Maybe that's part of it too. There's not really a proper Hollywood Bowl film. I mean, there's newsreel footage that people have synced up and things like that. But is that part of that package? Again, big question mark.
No, I agree with you on the tie-in there, Tom. I think that's not a big stretch at all. I think something will definitely happen. The question is what. So.
And of course, in terms of a proper soundtrack album, that thing it'll finish airing on Hulu, and about 90 seconds later, that thing will be floating.
Oh, of course.
That's a gimme.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, based a lot on what you said, Tom, and this would be my wish. It doesn't matter to me how the 77 album came out. I never minded bouncing around from a 64 performance to a 65, back to 64 like that. Either do it like that, and like you said, Tom, include those other 4 songs that aren't represented. And if you listen to the bootlegs, If I Fell, I think came out, it was superb. I mean, not only that, but that's one primary example of, despite hearing all these screams, you can still hear them harmonize really well on If I Fell.
It kind of recalls This Boy from the Washington D.C. shows and the Sullivan shows. They still, they still intuitively were so locked in that it made it sound good. So, and that's one of the ones that you don't really think of as, a staple of the live shows. You never see it really in films. But actually, I'm sure you guys probably peeked in last night, because it's always better on TV than on DVD, when the Turner Classics last night showed A Hard Day's Night on TV. And, my favorite song, or my favorite, portion of that movie is the first song of the the final show that they do, when it all gets together and they do And Tell Me Why, because it's clearly a song they never did live, not on BBC radio. And you say, wow, this is really cool to hear them. Obviously it's the record, but wow, it's cool to see them doing Tell Me Why. Yeah, we see them do She Loves You in virtually every concert film.
Right.
But wow, seeing them do Tell Me Why, how cool was that? So If I Fell being part of that TV set, that they do at the end of Hard Day's Night. When I was watching it last night and they segue into If I Fell, I said, oh, that I'm really going to miss that on a Hollywood Bowl album. That should have been there.
Yeah. Well, I would have preferred if they had either just a single disc with all the songs represented between 64 and 65, like you were suggesting, Tom, or have one complete 64 show and one complete 65 show, which could all fit on one disc. And you would have all the songs represented.
I know. No, it would be a great idea if that were ever done. I mean, what kind of sick and twisted mind would think of that?
Well, you know what they could do? I mean, taking Tom's idea one step further, since, a double disc set is going to cost what a double disc set costs no matter what's on it, basically.
Right.
They could have had the 64 show, the 265 shows, and then for people who are fond of the 1977 album, fill out the second disc with the 1977 album. It's repetition, it's fine, but there are, people are fond, like as Tom is, of that sequence, that album, its sound. So, and you have half a disc to waste anyway.
And
so,
on that point, Alan, it's not without precedent. Remember, they did that with the mono and stereo boxes when they put out the 87 CD mixes.
Right.
On a stereo mixes on what's otherwise a mono box.
Yeah.
To have the alternate version there, or the the latter day or the revisionist version, whatever label you want to put on it. So it's really not without precedent either.
True.
Yeah. I was going to ask, based on the live performances that we've seen and heard, whether it's bootleg, you watch it on YouTube, whatever, do you really think that the Hollywood Bowl represents their best live performance? I mean, obviously, we'd have loved to have had anything from Hamburg besides the Star Club, something that was board quality, obviously. But of what we have heard, would you say the Hollywood Bowl really represents their best live performance?
I'm not sure I would say that. If we're talking about concerts as opposed to live on TV, I think that the end of '63 there when they were doing that Swedish TV
drop
show.
in.
Yeah, I mean they were on fire there.
Yeah.
In terms of a concert setting, I mean, you got to go the distance to beat Washington, D.C.
Yeah,
they brought it that night. And it was so new and so fresh, and no one knew what to make of it. And what was kind of cool is it wasn't the standard tour set list. You were getting Please Please Me in there. You were getting this
Roll Over Beethoven.
Right? George leading off the concert, right? Yeah. How about that? Just start there. There's a lot of good energetic performances in there. Shea is great. I mean, Shea, we're so used to seeing it, whether it be on the bootlegs or on the movies or some of the tapes that have been around. Certainly, they're better there than they are anywhere on the '66 tour. That's for sure. I mean, the
Paris '65 is great. Maybe
Paris
better than Shea.
'65 is dynamite. Yeah.
Yeah.
But certainly by '66, and we all know the stories, and I'm sure this will be part of your Revolver show. They finished mixing Revolver. They didn't even rehearse for that tour, and did nothing for the new album. They really couldn't have cared less about the '66 tour. But the '64 Washington D.C. is a dynamite live concert show, and some of the British and European TV stuff from the end of '63 certainly, they're at the top of their game.
And some of those TV performances are amongst their best.
Oh,
yes.
I mean, not only did they perform well, but you didn't have the screaming as loud.
Well, yeah, I mean,
so Blackpool is.
Yeah, it's not just that it sounds better, but they could hear it better, and that goes a long, long way.
Yeah. Huh. Al, any thoughts on this on Hollywood Bowl?
Yeah, well, I think it probably, since Tom mentioned the fact that that was the first new Beatles album that he was able to get, because he was a little too young to have experienced the '60s albums. So I think in that respect, and there's a lot of people that are in that same age range who had the same experience. So it's probably best that they do release at least the audio portion of the Hollywood Bowl album in its original form, and then tack on the four bonus tracks, even though they don't really make any sort of thematic sense, because, as Tom said, Paul is saying goodnight and everything, and doing Long Tall Sally, and then come four more songs, and which makes no sense. But the purists who remember the Hollywood Bowl album in its original form would be going crazy if they had simply blended in those 4 extra tracks. I think that's, and the and the cover. I mean, a cover is a cover. It's especially these days where the physical form is a CD. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. I mean, you can, people can easily just simply take, as I'm sure Tom knows, just simply take a snapshot basically of of the LP cover and, size it down and put it in a CD jewel box or whatever you're going to use, and you've got the original cover. If it means that much to you. I think the fact that the album itself has been remastered or remixed, whatever, from the original 3-track masters, I think that counts for a lot. And from seeing one review that I saw over the weekend that I believe Tom sent around from Wog Blog,
yep,
it sounds as if the sound on the album is extremely good, and that the crowd isn't quite as intrusive as it was on the original LP. So, from that standpoint, that's certainly a positive, because there seems to be this kind of negative reaction that from certain members of the hardcore that the average sort of rank and file Beatle fan is not going to like this album because it's a live recording, and that the performances aren't their best, and that it really should have been more of a hardcore archivist release with the complete shows and da 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 da. Whether how it is as a listening experience, I think is up to the individual listener.
Well, in a way, the fact that you have all that screaming, it's a document of that time.
Yes, exactly.
So it really gives you an idea of what the Beatles were going through. I mean, yes, strictly on a performance level, I'd like to hear just the band and nothing else and playing live. But that's not the way it was, and that's not the way they heard it. They could barely hear themselves in the first few years there.
You're right.
64 and 65 especially. So you really get a taste of what it was like for them.
Yeah.
The only down moments really would be, and I know I Feel Fine is not in the collection, but if you ever listen to I Feel Fine from the Hollywood Bowl, you hear the screaming at a point where George is doing his lead guitar part before they get the next verse, and you can barely hear it. When it's the whole band, you can hear everything. But when it's just, one part, sometimes it's hard to hear just that, single that out. So that's when it suffers. But overall, the fact that you hear the band at all above this,
yes,
that's just something to be grateful for, and it makes you realize even when they couldn't hear themselves, they were so locked in. They really were. I mean, they could have done this in their sleep. And I suppose in '66 they were doing that anyway, whether they had their hearts into it or not. But they were so good that it didn't really matter whether they heard themselves or not. They can still do at least a passable performance, and in most cases it was far better than that.
But I will second Tom's point that the Washington Coliseum is probably the single best example of what the Beatles were like as a performing band.
In a concert setting,
They were just incredibly on that night. I can remember back in '64 reading Michael Braun's account it was done in a magazine in the U.S., but it was the book called Love Me Do that Michael Braun wrote, which was really the first kind of really honest account of the Beatles during their rise to world fame. And Ringo, after the Washington Coliseum concert, I mean, he's playing like he's possessed. And he said after the show, I could have played for these people all night.
Wow.
Ringo definitely brought it that night.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that every 2 or 3 songs he had to get up and move the drums.
I think for that show, you want not just an album of it, though. You want the video, because
Yes.
the video also adds
Very
a dimension that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Can I offer a couple of cantankerous comments?
Sure.
Okay, you know, I keeping in mind, I mean, I like the 1977 album. I obviously got it when it came out, listened to it a lot. I'm not, I don't really mean to diss that album when I am in fact about to diss that album. You know,
having that said,
from my point of view, this was an album that came out in 1977, 7 years after the Beatles broke up, and it was, let us say, an early attempt at an archival release. And so, to me, it doesn't have the kind of stature that one of the actual "Please Please Me Through, Let It Be" albums had. To me, it could just as well be the Beatles' Rarities album. And nobody particularly is saying, well, you know, I don't know, we don't have the Rarities album. All those mono tracks that were on there got put on the mono set or on the, you know, other things. And, you know, we're never going to get the Rarities album, and we don't need the Rarities album because, in effect, it's been replaced. And you could replace the Hollywood Bowl album in the same way, you know, or you could put it out as an archival release, you know, simply saying this is what we put out in 1977, but still then have the shows, because I think there is something to be said for a complete Beatles show start to finish that in a way Hollywood Bowl doesn't give you, because it's a composite. You know, the Washington Coliseum film does, and it's out there on iTunes. But, you know, there are, apart from Washington Coliseum, there is nothing close to being officially released that tells you what a Beatles set was like from start to finish. And since these were not, you know, there were no okay, the 66 shows, I could see them being maybe a little bit embarrassed about putting out, although, you know what, they're the 66 shows. So, you know, I think people who follow their career arc know the whole story about how they didn't particularly care. But these are documents of that time. But the 64 and 65 Hollywood Bowl shows, I mean, there's nothing embarrassing there, you know. So, I don't know. That's my. I think that's my view of it, and that I don't really have a particular reverence about the 1977 album. It's an after the fact album for me anyway. It's nice. Liked it. I like the cover. And also I was thinking, you know, and Al, you said that, okay, you know, so the cover is the cover. Who cares? You can put your cover on, but then you said that, and they've used the master tapes and they've cleaned it up, and now there's less screaming on it. Well, if people are going to be nostalgic about the 1977 album as such, why wouldn't they be nostalgic about more screaming? You know, in other words, you know.
Yeah, I could give you a perspective on that, Alan.
Sure.
And having been, you know, a few years behind the curve. Okay, I was about 15 when that came out, as I said. I think you're correct that it was the first pass at a you know, an archival release or a dip into the vaults. But at the same time, it was very much riding a wave of renewed Beatlemania. After Paul toured and the Rock and Roll Music album, and heck, a song that was never a single off of a little album called Revolver made the top 10. All that stuff is going on in 76. It kind of validated some 7 years down the road that the Beatles were still viable, that they were, you know, and of course, any conversation like this always ended with, well, gee, do you think they'll get back together? But at that time, I think it kind of kept stoking the fire that was, you know, Beatlemania a la mid-70s that had come on. You know, it was, you know, there was a bit of a hangover from the 73, 74 glory period of the solo records. And then the, you know, Wings breaking through, you know, in America, you know, on tour in 76. And as I say, all those, you know, the Beatles are back in the top 10. I think that was kind of a response, or, you know, a way to stoke that flame too. So I think it was a bit more than just a dip into the archive. I think people knew the Beatles were, here come the air quotes, history at that point. They were viewing them as history, but still somehow being very, very relevant.
Yeah, this industry is based on, if you have success at any time with any kind of an idea, you want to bounce off that and do it very quickly. I mean, who knows? We might not have had rock and roll music had the Red and the Blue albums not done as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So it all played off each other. The success of the solo Beatles helped the Beatles albums and vice versa. So, yeah, definitely. I do have to say that the point you made, Alan, is so true about, you get so much more out of watching a concert from start to finish and knowing how great the Beatles were live that way than, I do love hearing the audio, but it's far more effective if you watch the Washington Coliseum show. Mm-hmm. But I made the point last week that to the general public that don't study the Beatles at all, they have no idea what a great band they were live.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that is, partly the Beatles' fault for not releasing stuff that is in the vaults, probably because they felt that it just wasn't good enough. Or,
That's true.
they weren't proud of it.
The BBC albums took a nice bite out of that apple, no, Ken?
Yeah.
The Beatles live at the BBC. I mean, even though those were, by and large, not done in front of concert audiences.
Right.
They were, all intents and purposes, live, under the best conditions where you could hear just the band.
I know, but I think to the general public, they don't think, unless they hear an audience, they don't think of it as a live performance. Right. It's called live at the BBC, and they're done in one take, in most cases. So they were really live, but I think it doesn't have the feel of a live recording without having an audience.
Yeah.
So I don't think people look at it as a live album, but, we talked about all these other performances, the Shea Stadium, Budokan, whichever ones you want, and I just don't see why in all these years they haven't been released. We've known that they cleaned up the video for Shea, and now it's going to be in the theaters, which is a good segue here. But why does it take all this long for it to? And in fact, we don't even know if the Shea performance is actually going to come out physically. So
right.
Everything takes forever. It could just be that they're so meticulous and they want everything to be so perfect, and they care about their image, which is another thing I wanted to bring up because a few shows ago we were talking about the Beatles Inner Circle, and we brought up Neil Aspinall, and from what I heard about Neil, he was just so very protective of the Beatles, and he wanted that catalog and the memories to be perfect to the point where you don't release below par stuff. And so I've often said it's miraculous that the Beatles anthology CDs came out, as well as the BBC stuff. But, I just don't think, and believe me, I hope I'm wrong here. I just don't think there's going to be a lot from the vaults that Apple will release because I don't know if it's something that the Beatles feel themselves. Maybe Neil helped instill that in them. But, the Beatles have such high standards. And part of the reason why they're still so popular to this day and you still have new young audiences discover them is because that catalog is so strong the way it is. And maybe by putting out something that's considered below par, it might tarnish their reputation a bit. So, we've talked about this before, but if you guys have any feelings about this.
Plus, there may be, in a sense, almost, and this is a charge that some of the hardcore people have been making, that there's basically it's laziness on the part of Apple, that it's easier for them to simply quote unquote lower their standards and shoot for the quote unquote mainstream with releases like this. Because of the success of one and its ongoing success, they feel that supposedly it's easier to not go all out in a sense with archival multi-disc archival releases in the way that say Bob Dylan or Bruce Springsteen or various other The Who, Elton John, various other what they call heritage artists have done. That it's simply easier to go the easy route, just put out a disc with it already an already existing album or another repackaging of some kind.
Yeah, but you know what? The Beatle catalog would start looking like the Beach Boy one pretty soon.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The Beach Boys are doing some real nice things over the past couple of years, like that. Was it the Party album last year? They did the complete sessions, and they did a nice job with that. But to repackage them, I mean, you guys remember after the one came out, and they said, "Well, what are they going to do next?" And Ringo said, "Oh, we're going to do it, all the number twos." Which, by the way, would be a real short record. I think.
Yes, very short.
Most people don't know that,
Right, but people grabbed hold of that and said that's going to be next. Like that's probably the next best group of Beatles. Like, it's stupid. Put that album out.
It would basically just be Penny Lane, right? I mean,
no. Penny Lane makes the one album.
Yes, Penny Lane was number one.
Yeah, but remember that's because the one album sort of uses weird. But remember the story was that Penny Lane didn't make it to number one because
in England,
in the UK.
So so that's the only one that I think only made it up to number two and didn't get up to number one. So
not true. Not true.
Really? Is that true?
No, in America, there were a number of them.
Yeah.
Do you want to know a secret went to number two? Yellow Submarine went to number two.
Twist and Shout, I think.
Yes.
But Yellow Submarine is on the one album. Remember, you got to do US, UK.
Okay. I'm just thinking you. All right. Okay. You made
easy.
Okay. Well, it would be a short album anyway.
I think I counted it once. It was like 6 songs. Okay. But people, to the point here, it's a stupid collection. Why would anybody do that? But playing to the lowest common denominator as it was. Did they make it did they expand the one album and on the front it's a big, a 10? All the Beatles' top 10 singles, and now it's a double album. I don't know.
Well, that's what they did with Elvis.
No, I know.
Oh, God, yes.
Do you want the Beatle catalog to look like that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, with Elvis, it's a little different. But, they have that Follow That Dream series where you basically will have the whole original album and then maybe 3 other discs of outtakes. And really, that wouldn't bother me for the Beatles to have, if that were possible. But as Tom said, he was just talking about Let It Be and Let It Be Naked. The original albums are always there, no matter what archival stuff they put out.
Right.
And
usually,
I would love to just see more archival stuff that shows more about what happened. And I understand they feel, some things are substandard that we don't feel are substandard. And so, obviously, who's right, them or us? Clearly, us.
Well, no, it's not a matter of better. I think people kind of have to, trust that if the Beatles put out whichever take number it was of Hey Jude, okay, maybe they were onto something. That record came out all right. There might be an alternate where we say, wow, he phrased it a little differently and how cool that is, but
right.
They're the artists. They get to pick that, right?
That's true. But when they were doing the anthology, they were saying that themselves. They were saying, "Hey, this is actually a pretty good version."
Well,
too.
I mean, that goes way back. It goes way before anthology. I mean, you go back to the Abbey Road show in '83. I mean, I went to that thing, and the first time I heard "While My Guitar Gently Weeps" acoustic, I was floored. I mean, no words that it sounded that different. I mean, look, you don't expect that the first time he wrote it, he called the band in and said, okay, here are the chords, follow me on this. He wrote it on a guitar, but that it was much more gentle. I mean, you guys obviously have heard this a million times. And so most of the people listening to this show, the difference between the demo there and the finished product, it's a marked transformation of what it set out to be. Not always the case. I mean, you listen to some of the White Album demos for, I don't know, Junk even, a solo song. The final version is a very close cousin to the to the demo. He kind of had a good idea in his mind what he wanted it to sound like. But that being said, you get the idea when you listen to Let It Be Naked, and particularly the Fly on the Wall disc, again, the great missed opportunity of all time.
Yeah.
It's clear that this is not the official Beatle album, that it is the alternative, it's the choice. So, who knows what they're going to do with the major album anniversaries that are just right around the corner, Pepper, White Album, and Abbey Road. Will there be, a bonus disc of the, the rough takes or the demos? Who knows? They've given us no reason to hope that will happen, at least not based on a couple of okay albums like Rubber Soul and Revolver.
Yeah.
So,
when have they really honored anniversaries?
Well,
I mean, A Hard Day's Night was shown in theaters, but then they didn't own that.
But the 50th anniversary of 64 a couple years ago, they couldn't let that go. Okay, and they put out the American box, and that was probably the right thing to put out because it was a decidedly American anniversary. You had Sullivan Show and the British invasion and all that. So, it's really rare that they do. I think the last time I remember them doing an anniversary, Ken, might have been when they made it their business to put out Sgt. Pepper.
I was going to say that.
Yeah,
when the CD came out.
Yeah, because they got to say, guess what? It was 20 years ago today. Even they couldn't screw that up. But,
they're not in love with drawing attention to anniversaries and numbers.
No.
That's for certain.
It tells people, hey, this is 50 years ago. That was ages ago,
Yeah. The message I hear with that is, this was 50 years ago, and you still hear this just as much on the radio as anything that was put out last month. Got to be doing something right.
Can I make a point? Yeah, can I make a point about the... I think my mic went off. I don't know.
I was going to say, I thought you had disappeared.
No. Last week I mentioned something, and Tom, since you're here, I can bounce this off of you. I'm surprised you were talking about the Beach Boys catalog, and I'm surprised that they didn't do a special version, a deluxe version of Hollywood Bowl, and maybe a deluxe version of all, of more than one concert, venue, which may actually be what they're planning somewhere down the road, but I'm surprised that they, at least for the bowl, they didn't do a bigger put both the 64 and 65 concerts like you were talking about earlier. And I really think they, especially given you were sitting here talking about the different factors and why they didn't do it, and one of the things I was thinking of was the foursome themselves, the hierarchy couldn't come to an agreement, but the other thing obviously would have been with the record company before it, and given what you said about the Beach Boys, and given all the Beach Boys releases, you would think that Universal would have been fine with that. That it's weird.
Universal would be, but Universal can't do anything without the Beatles' permission.
Right.
Yeah, but you know what? They brought in a guy like
Jeff Jones.
Because he really knows. He's a great record guy. He knows how to do reissues. He knows how to keep the balance between what's saleable and what's important and what the diehards are going to want. I mean, you don't really have to look much further than the reissues he did, let's say, for the Byrds back in CBS days. Those were fantastic. When they brought him in, I was real happy because I said, here's a guy who knows how to mine a catalog. And, by and large, what they have put out, I've been very happy with. I think every time they put something out, they did a real good job with what they set out to do. In this case, they're going to do a real good job with what they set out to do. I just don't think what they set out to do captured really what was important, particularly to the fans, what was important to the whole story, balancing that latter-day history, that 1977, Beatlemania Redux, and capturing the essence of the original shows. You'd need more real estate than they're giving it right now.
Right. And that's kind of what, that was my thought too. I will say, and I mentioned this on Facebook again, I'll tell you, you weren't here when we talked about it last time, after my trip to Southern California, when I went through the studios, walking in that room and seeing those tape boxes of Hollywood Bowl sitting on the shelf, that was something. That was a mind blower. My wife will tell you, I was talking about that for hours after.
I bet.
I still maybe the plan is somewhere down the road to do something. Maybe they'll coordinate. Maybe the plan is to do this thing gradually and get it all together at the end. I don't know. You would think, though, that they would have come up with a better plan. But maybe I do think that we will see Shea at some point. I don't know how, but I do think
it doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry. It doesn't make any sense that they would do all this work restoring Shea Stadium and not releasing it.
Right.
Does it make sense to show it in the theater and then not release it?
Well, you remember they cleaned this up, 20 years ago.
Yeah,
during the anthology.
that's true.
As they did for Let It Be. And the bits that we saw in the anthology even then looked phenomenal and sounded phenomenal. And
it's probably better now.
You got to
probably cleaned it up more.
They've made a 4K version, and we saw some of that in that 8 Days a Week clip. Interestingly enough,
yeah.
Steve, what are you hearing about whether it will come out when the DVD of the film comes out?
There have been a couple of people, and I'm not going to mention names, but there have been a couple of people who have apparently talked and said, no, it's not going to come out when the DVD comes out. But my suspicion is that they will do something down the road. I mean, they almost have to. They can't although the precedent look what happened with Washington. They didn't do anything. They just left it on iTunes, which to this day still surprises me that they didn't put that out.
It's ridiculous.
But maybe the plan is, now that they're doing all this live stuff, is to put it out. Maybe at some point, we don't know, for example, what's coming out at Christmas. This is not the Christmas release. At least I'm not considering it the Christmas release. So who knows? Who knows what's going? And
presumably a DVD for 8 Days a Week would time out pretty much right in the middle of the Christmas market.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but the advance word is from a couple of people who claim to have talked to Apple is that it's not going to happen. But
there's not going to be a DVD for 8 Days a Week, or no. Shea Stadium.
I would think there's going to be Shea Stadium.
Okay,
it's not going to come out, but that's what they're saying. I can't see them putting this in the theater and letting it go like that. I really can't. Although, interestingly enough, they're not showing it on Hulu. So, there's a couple of things to consider. It's hard to predict. We know that. They've never been, they've never done anything. I shouldn't say logically, but we've never been able to tell. They've surprised us. The Shea was a surprise. The Shea caught everybody by surprise. I honestly didn't think they'd do the Shea thing this way.
Hey, listen, the Beatles won plus took me by surprise to have all the videos out.
Yeah, I thought that was a great release.
Well, yeah. We all knew that was coming eventually. It wasn't that big a surprise. But
hey, they could take forever if they want to. So.
Yeah.
Well, and again, we have to, you've got the four parties that have to agree. So it's going to be tough. But I think that something will happen with Shea. Maybe not with the DVD, and I would be amazed if they. I think that's a strange decision not to do it with the DVD. A very strange decision.
That would really help the DVD sell if it was packaged together.
Right. Look for example, and this is not probably not the best example, but that Frank Sinatra HBO special that came out was it last year?
Mm-hmm.
You could buy the Blu-ray of the special by itself, which was like 3 hours long, but you could also buy an expanded version in a box set that had a TV interview with him, vintage TV interview, and it had another concert, and it had a bunch of books and stuff. So, that would make sense. That would make sense. That's the kind of thing that people would buy in a minute. I don't understand why the small package with the CD. That just doesn't register.
Well, except that, playing devil's advocate, they can point to the fact that that One Plus was the first time that a release of the one album didn't do all that well. Now, the reason why it didn't do all that well is because they put out too many different formats and it was very confusing. But they can point to that and say, see, if we do it go the deluxe route, it's not gonna sell as well. So it's easier for us to just go the easy route and just put out the movie.
or just limit the choices. I mean, the One Plus, I imagine you guys bought the one I did, right? The remix CD and the double DVD. Okay, it's much like pure McCartney, right? There was the short version, the long version, the vinyl version.
Let's not get into pure McCartney.
Okay,
why not? Let's
be sure to stop by the Fest for Beatles.
Yes,
lighten that one up, as well as the Hollywood Bowl. Please, if listeners.
Well, the one album also had the problem. I mean, whatever you can say about the multiple formats and whether it was confusing, the thing was something they had put out 15 years earlier, and this was the third incarnation of it over 15 years.
Right.
It kind of was, for a lot of people, it was like, I already got that album,
it's 30 million copies later.
Yeah.
How many of them do you think you can really sell?
So between that and doing zero marketing, it was a problem.
Well, there was one format that they didn't put out on that, and if any album should see this format, it would be one, and that would be a mono version.
Mm-hmm.
That would be something. All the singles just as they originally appeared.
When we talked about the Beatles 1 Plus and its lack of success, part of the reason why, especially you, Al, thought that it didn't do well was because, and this was a surprise to me, but it could just very well be true, to people like us, how wonderful it was to see all these videos in the best possible quality, and yet young people today don't care about videos.
No.
So, you're reaching for the hardcore, the older generation that cares about seeing what really was a part of history, and how ahead of their time the Beatles were at putting out videos and promo clips. Well, but to younger people, it wasn't reaching them the way the Beatles 1 did when it first came out.
Yeah, think about it. We're recording this on the 35th anniversary of the debut of MTV.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it's been some years since MTV showed videos to any great extent, other than the Video Music Awards and maybe an anniversary of themselves, like every August 1st. Other than that, they haven't been in the video business in a long time. So young people that have kind of grown up watching all the other stuff on MTV, they don't care about videos.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right about that, Al, and it actually speaks to the bigger picture of a lot of the larger Beatle memorabilia dealers even say, people that cared about this are now past all that. And, the next generation of fans doesn't care about, I don't know, make it up the gum cards or the Halloween costumes or anything.
Yeah.
That had great appeal to people who lived with it and experienced it. And maybe one generation after that, where people said, "Oh, I remember I had that when I was a kid," but that's gone. You get to a second generation after that, it's far less. It's got far less of a connection, and I think that's happened here with everything but the core product. Here, and the core product is obviously the music catalog. So that could be, could speak to the video issue as well.
Yeah, and you may have a lot of young people that may not care about seeing a Beatles concert.
Yeah.
Or hearing a Beatles concert. They're going to have to put some excitement into the marketing of this thing. I don't know. I mean, there'll probably be, TV commercials and stuff with footage, Hollywood Bowl footage and stuff. But they're going to, that failure of OnePlus, they're going to have to look back at that and say, why didn't this work, and what can we do to make this new thing work? And it's not just having the movie out there that's going to do it. I mean, so I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see where this all goes.
But it is exciting, I think for all of us that the Shea concert will be on the big screen, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that because I've never seen that in a movie theater.
Oh, I think I saw it in a drive-in once. It was probably like a 30th generation print, those drive-in midnight concert movies. I know I've seen it on a big screen, but we didn't know then that it should look like it looks now.
Well, I mean, also though, this may seem strange for me to say, which I can say now but couldn't say 2 years ago, but you elitist guys in the big cities, you're going to get to see this.
Yeah.
And, I don't know that this is going to be screened in Portland, Maine.
Or
I don't
in
know.
Pittsburgh.
I kind of doubt it.
Bunch of hicks.
I moved to the Midwest.
Really?
How are the moose over there, Alan?
Yeah, they're big.
Yeah, actually,
say hi to them.
Quite a day in New York. I'm planning on spending the afternoon in the theater, and then that night Jeff Lynne rolls into town with ELO here in the big city on September 16th. So that's a full day.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Has anybody, Steve, seen a theater list?
No,
Yeah.
have not.
I looked online, and what's kind of weird, the closest I found was like a couple of specific theaters, like one in, I don't know, Baltimore or something, one up in Boston or something, have it listed like in their, hey, make sure you come to the Baltimore Playhouse. We're going to be showing the Beatle movie, the Ron Howard thing, dates and times to be announced. They've obviously contracted for it, but there's no schedule that I've been able to find.
I'm sure they're going to post something online. There's got to be something they will put online.
For sure.
They did something for Rock Show, if you remember.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's too early for it is all. I mean, the album is, 5-6 weeks away. So that means the movie is 6-7 weeks away. It's too early for that.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the movie website and you go under book tickets, you can search for the locations, and I just tried to do my town and also San Francisco, and it says unable to search your location. So it might be too early.
Yeah. Actually, I looked yesterday and searched. I found a movie from 1998 called 8 Days a Week. Some teen comedy or something.
Actually, I take it back. I'm scrolling down here, and there are a lot of British cinemas listed, but I don't see any American at all. Let me see if Belfast. Yeah, the Odeon Belfast is listed, and you can buy tickets for the Odeon Belfast if you guys want to go to Belfast and see it. But it doesn't look like they have the American theaters listed on the website yet. So
it's got to be coming.
Yeah, it's got to be. It's got to be.
Yeah, it'll be coming. That's for sure.
All right, before we close, because I know that many of our listeners are salivating right now because they want to know what brute force is really like. Our own Tom has the inside story on this, and he did. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because online I did see a performance of him at the Fest for Beatle fans, backing up brute force on acoustic guitar for the King of Pho.
That is correct. The long lost legendary Apple single, "The King of Pho" by Brute Force. Brute was an add-on at the Fest for Beatle fans in New York back in April, and he gave a quick little talk about his days at Apple and what that was like, and did a set on what's called the Apple Jam stage. And he has a very much a family affair kind of band. It's his daughter and actually his grandson, a little kid banging away on a toy drum. Mm-hmm. And he did a few songs and told some stories. And then we had him in what's called the Fabratory to talk about much the same ground. And there was an acoustic guitar there, so we weren't going to let him leave without regaling us all with an impromptu take of the King of Pho. So I had the pleasure of accompanying him on the acoustic guitar, and he sang it, and the rather intimate crowd that we had sang along with every single word of it. So it was a lot of fun, actually. He was a charming guy. But
are there any alternate takes that you have? No,
that was a one-shot deal.
Oh, okay, one take.
Totally, one shot, no rehearsal, right? No lessons. And that will not be part of the Scotch Plainsman set coming up, in case you must know, Ken. Yes, Ken, I don't know if you saw the post for our show coming up. Time for just a quick plug. With Pat Denizio's band, the Scotch Plainsmen. We'll be opening up for the Smithereens, Pat's main gig, on Labor Day weekend at the Wonder Bar. Ken, do you know where that is?
No, I do not.
It's in Asbury Park, very near where you bought the uranium field.
I get it. There's your honeymooners line.
I couldn't wait to get that in. So, anyway, for the New Jersey listeners, if you're around Labor Day weekend, we'll be there at the Wonder Bar in Asbury Park. Actually, we, the Scotch Plainsmen, always do a Beatle-themed set, and because that will be the week coinciding with the end of the Beatles touring years proper, see how we link that back to the Hollywood Bowl? We'll be recreating the Candlestick Park set list. So
Okay.
that'll be our set before the guys who know how, the Smithereens, they come on and bring the house down after that.
Tom, that'll be very good, sir.
Very good, sir.
All right. This has been a tremendous show. So if you would like to get in touch with us, we do have an email address for the show. It's thingswesaidtoday.radioshow@gmail.com. Also, remember, we have our own Facebook page at Things We Said Today, and we have a Twitter account, which is what, Steve?
Things We Said Fab.
Maybe one of these years I'll remember it. And
Okay.
if you would like to get in touch with Steve, you can do so how?
You can write me at BeatlesExaminer@gmail.com. I may eventually change that email address, but for now I'm going to stick with it. And you can also catch me on Facebook on my real name page. And also I have a Beatles news group where we talk about Beatles news and commentary. And feel free to join up.
Mm-hmm. And as for you, Al?
You can contact me through Facebook, Al Sussman, or on Twitter at ASUSS49, or through Beatle Fan Magazine, www.beatlefan.com, or www.paradingpress.com for Changing Times, 101 Days That Shaped a Generation, that in fact in another 10 days you could pick up at the Fest for Beatles Fans at the Hyatt Regency O'Hare in Chicago.
Yes, come visit us.
I was about to seg that into Tom, since you and Tom will both be there.
That's
right.
You didn't let me do that, though. But anyway, since, Tom, you're going to be at the fest, first of all, people want to get in touch with you. How can they do that?
Best way is through brunchradio.com, nice and simple. Brunchradio.com, we have a contact us page. Click on the most handsome guy you can find, and it'll get to me. It'll go through Donnie, then Joe, then ultimately to me, I suppose. So that's how to get us. And also, obviously, in person, just in a couple weeks at the Chicago Hyatt Regency O'Hare, as Al mentioned, at the Fest for Beatle Fans, the big 40th Fest in Chicago. We'll have Klaus Vormann there. We'll have Peter Asher there, Billy J. Kramer. Lots of great guests. Pat Denizio's coming out to do a set as well. It's going to be a terrific time. And we will also be covering the Hollywood Bowl and the Pure McCartney. I'll have sessions on those in the Fabratory. Lots of fun and games, more fun than we should be allowed to have.
So you should have done the Pure McCartney show here on this show with us, Tom.
Well,
We'll have to invite you back for that.
We had the New York. That was
Not again.
No, we did that one in New York at the fest. That was actually, I thought, pretty.
Oh,
well
it was
done.
good, but that wasn't recorded for this show. So we'll have to do it over again.
I can't do everything.
I'm brushing my hair that week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same here.
No,
Alan?
actually, we're going to have the Pure McCartney thing in the Fabratory. For those that don't know how the Fabratory works, it's very interactive. So I'll be the host or the moderator and talk about what it is for some people who might not know the full story. Not everyone is so ravenous for this stuff as we all are, and explain why it's been, to put it mildly, controversial among diehard McCartney fans.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll have the interactive part, with, what are a couple of your favorite Paul McCartney songs that didn't make it on here? Because it's not strict criteria of, boy, it had to be a top 10 hit or anything. It's clearly not that. But for the free form or, playlist type nature of it, is somebody going to raise their hand and say, gee, I wish Daytime, Nighttime Suffering was on there? That's pretty good. We'll go through that and see what people, really would have liked to seen on there.
Well, that's what I've been trying to get these guys to do on the show.
Yeah.
Anyway, Alan, how's by you?
Okay,
Get in
you
touch
can
with you.
You can reach me on Facebook at either Alan Cozen or my alter ego, Alan Cozen Remixed. I'm on Twitter at Cozen. You could write to all my editors and say that they should have more stuff by me if you want. Yeah, but that basically will do it.
And in today's, as we're taping this on August 1st, and in today's New York Times, there is in fact a piece that Alan did on on the 10th anniversary of Love, and it's not a review, but it's a kind of an all-purpose kind of summing up of Love after 10 years.
A critic's notebook, they call it. And
yes,
actually it's in the physical paper, August 2nd. It's online today.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Great.
It's on forever, actually.
And who are we going to see at MetLife next week? I mean, out of the 5 of us. I'll be there.
I'm going.
Kenny, you'll be there? Very good. Anyone else joining us? Steve, you flying in from the other coast to join us at this?
No,
No,
I'm not, unfortunately.
Oh, Alan or Al?
Nope.
Sadly, no.
Will Ricky Glover be there?
That if I'm a gambling man, and I am, I will say yes. I don't know that for sure, but I'm going to guess yes.
You think the chances are 100% that he'll be there?
The chances must be 9 out of 10, Ken, or maybe even higher than that.
You're stealing my lines, Tom. Jesus, it's no fun.
9 out of 10, he'll be there.
Anyway,
it's like asking if Bob Gannon will be there. Our good friend Bob. Bob will be.
Okay. Right, Bob will be there for sure.
Right, so that's a home game for him. I mean, come on, it's Jersey.
Yeah.
He's got to see him in China or wherever he's played. Bob will be there, so you can't miss him. Bob's bigger than a bread box.
Okay, and as for me, Ken Michaels, if you would like to email me, my direct email is everylittlething@att.net. You can also visit my website, which is kenmichaelsradio.com. And as a matter of fact, since we're mentioning Beatle Fan and the Fest for Beatle Fest, I should point out that on my website, on my trivia page, I now have... See, I'm moving into the digital age here, boys.
Oh, my goodness.
Uh-oh.
Well, Bruce Spicer will be a guest at the Fest,
Whoa.
and I'm giving away the Beatles Story on Capitol Records Part 2, the albums, the digital edition, now on my website, as well as Kid O'Toole's book, Songs We Were Singing, guided tours through the Beatles' lesser-known tracks. So that's amongst the many prizes that you can win on my weekly Beatles trivia. And I also have a page now, because I've actually been getting some new stations taking every little thing. And there's one page that lists all my affiliate stations. So if you want to catch the show, and every radio station that signs up for it can play any one of my shows they want to. So you can hear different shows at different times during the week. It's not all the same. But there is a page there for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's one station out of Maui. Let's hear it from Maui.
Let's hear it from Maui.
Right.
Wowie. Wowie.
Maui.
Ken, gone Troppo. Ken has officially gone Troppo.
As a matter of fact, that my wife Joanne and I were Maui'd in Maui.
Is that right?
And we were. And the one solo Beatles CD I took with me was Gone Troppo, which we played when we were there, and we were married on the beach on Maui, and we had 4 wedding songs, and it was one from each Beatle.
That's very nice.
Wow.
Right there.
What was the Ringo song? I have to know.
You Never Know.
That's pretty good.
From Curly Sue. Because of the words in there. But the real cool thing, which I always like to bring up about my wedding songs, is that the one song from John that I picked was Grow Old With Me. And in the lyrics he says, face the setting sun when the day is done. And as that song's playing, the sun's setting.
That's nice.
We didn't plan that, but that's just the way it was.
Yeah, I had "Grow Old With Me" as my wedding song. Didn't work out too good. Well. Yeah.
I hope that doesn't bounce off on me. But anyway.
No, you will have much. You already have had much better luck with it than me.
I know. I've been married 14 years. My God.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. So this has been great, Tom. It has been wonderful having you on the show.
My pleasure as always, gentlemen.
Come
Good
back
luck.
soon, Tom.
Have some fun at the Fest for Beatle fans, which I know you will, and also with your gig with the Scotch Plainsmen And again, you want to repeat where that is and the date for that?
That's the Wonder Bar in Asbury Park, very near Ken's Uranium Field. That's on Sunday night of Labor Day weekend, so it'll be September 4th. We'll be opening up for the fabulous Smithereens.
Care for any no-cal pizza there, Tom?
Yeah, there you go.
I got some right here for you.
They have a cool dressing room at this place. They have wallpaper that glows in the dark. No need for electric lights.
It's all honeymooners lines coming out of us right now. Anyway, this has been great. So, for Steve Marinucci, Alan Kozin, Al Sussman, and Tom Frangione, this is Ken Michaels thanking you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
RX.